think in a nutshell, it comes down to this. Average agencies change new clients, and the best agencies, they attract them.
Whether you're an agency or a freelancer, one of the most important activities is to be able to not only attract new clients, but also have a game plan and a strategy for how you're going to retain your current clients and maintain and improve your client satisfaction. And that's why I invited Denie from the agency team on so that we can discuss what's working now and what are the best ways that you can not only attract new clients, but also maintain the current clients that you have. Hope you enjoyed this discussion that I have with Denie.
Hey, Denie, once again, it's amazing to have you here and thank you for joining. And what I wanted to bring you about, this is probably the biggest question that we'll jump into what we're going to be talking about today. And it's all about this thought that you gave, which is retaining a new client is 10 times cheaper than acquiring a new one. So let's just start off by talking about some of the strategies you recommend for client retention.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron. First of all, thanks for having me today. It's always fun to jump on a podcast and nerd talk about Google Ads. So in one of my recent LinkedIn posts, I mentioned that it's 10 times cheaper to retain a client than to acquire a new one. And there are some strategies that allow you to retain your clients longer than if you wouldn't apply these. And of course, it always comes down to delivering the results. That's the most important thing because that's exactly what you were hired to do, right? But sometimes the performance is not as consistent as you'd like. And there's some gaps between the peaks. And when the performance is going well, sometimes performance isn't going so well. And then some other elements come into play besides results. So one of them is something that's actually very often overlooked and undervalued, but it's building a strong onboarding experience, like a smooth onboarding flow. Because also when it comes to Google Ads clients, a first impression is very important. Apart from making sure that all relevant access is shared, you also want to make sure that the expectations are managed so that the client knows exactly what he can expect from collaboration with you. And it can be done by creating a roadmap. So what will be done and when, basically help them prioritize what needs to happen in Google Ads, but also outside of Google Ads, like for example, the landing page and the offer. Because as you know, you don't want to start advertising if the landing page isn't optimized or the offer isn't competitive compared to the rest of the market. It's also important in the onboarding flow that you set the targets and the goals, and that will also determine which metrics you're going to report on in your monthly reports or weekly. And also the agreements on communication, like how often will you update them, which tools will be used, will you use just email, Loom videos, or direct messaging tools like Slack, and what frequency, of course. And when you set up that communication way of working, it's also important that you do it in a consistent way. And in between those agreed upon moments that you have contact, it's also important to do it proactively. So make them feel like they're in the loop. Always make sure that you're the first one to discover a problem and communicate about it. Because one of the worst things that you can do or that a client can experience is that they've discovered a problem and they have to inform you about it, right? I think you've had it with when you were managing your clients as well, right?
Yeah, no, I like what you're saying there. And the big thing, I really learned from when I first started, and I'm sure every freelancer or agency has been on this path, is that you start and you just want to sign up a client and you kind of forget some of these steps. And I know there's probably been some times where I could have signed up some clients, but when I started communicating what was really happening, I could just see it wasn't going to be a good fit. So I think I really try to map out the first 90 to 120 days. And then what I also do like to really, really enforce is you've got to be really, really careful, especially when you get into like a website section, especially if you're dealing with a smaller business who's created the website themselves. If there's things that you know do not work, you've got to be a little bit careful, but you do really have to let them know that Google Ads is only one of the important steps. They need to make sure they've got, like you said, the offer ready, the things that are ready from there. Are there any general recommendations that you have? Like for me, I found client reporting using Loom. Like I used Loom a lot. I found that as soon as I started introducing Loom, talking them through, rather than just sending them the report, talking through the report, showing them a screen share of the Google Ads dashboard, I really found that really helped paint the picture for them. Yeah. So is there any other, I guess, probably little strategies that you've found that have helped in terms of, reporting? Do you do reporters in Looker Studio formats, videos? Yeah. What do you see works?
I think it's actually pretty similar as to what you're doing. So what I like to do is they have on-demand access to Looker Studio. So whenever they want, they can just dive in the dashboard and see the results for themselves. So maximizing transparency. And after every month, what I like to do is I record a Loom, just like you, in which I take them through the Looker Studio, and sometimes, depending on the level, the Google Ads level of the client, sometimes also in the Google Ads account to show them a bit more about the details of certain developments in the performance. That way, I've taken them through the performance and the results. They have a Loom they can watch on demand and they can share it with their teammates.
Yeah.
And also there's a summary, a scripted out summary, of course, that Loom provides. So that's basically from multiple angles how they can get insights in the information and also rewatch it and share it with their colleagues.
Yeah, I also found it really, really helped in the Loom when I was trying to segment in terms of, generally I would do it in 3 levels, is I would get the wins out of the way. So I'd share like what we've been doing well. Then in the middle, I would really share, but I'd frame it as challenges. So rather than, like if we're not meeting certain targets, I would always frame it as these are the challenges that we're facing. And then I'd have always the actions off them. But then I would also finish with opportunities. And the reason why I just sort of found that is that you're kind of taking people through a journey of you're letting them know firstly what's going well, what you've done well. You then, rather than talking about not missing targets, you're talking about challenges. And I always try to communicate those challenges as a partnership of, this is what I'm doing on my side to fix the challenges. And if it is anything to do with like their offer or anything to do with their website, I always have it backed up with data. So, if you've got access to Google Analytics, like I'll actually take them through and go, look, we're getting people here, but they're falling off the page, or they're adding to cart and they're not buying, or they're filling out this part of the form, but they're not converting. So that way, I've just found it was a softer way of rather saying you need to fix your landing page. It's more like, this is what the data's telling us. What do you think? And then I'd always ask them, what do you think of the data? And try to always be consultative and like go, I'm part of the team here. This is what I'm looking at, what you do. And then I always found it was good to finish with opportunities. So that way, I really found it helpful talking about opportunities because we're talking about the future and how it's like pre-programming that I'm going to be involved in this account in 3, 6, 12 months from now.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes sense because people listen to stories, right? And if there's a natural flow in how you build up your Loom video, for example, first, like, okay, this is what we see. This is how it compares to the other comparison period. This is how we can explain those developments, and this is what we're going to do about it. So, yeah, you really set the noses in the right direction of this is what we see, this is what we're going to do, this is what we expect, and this is how we're going to report on it.
You mentioned something when you first started talking at being honest about times that we're not meeting the goals that were set, or times, situations where results have gone bad. I mean, have you, I guess, got any frameworks or any recommendations you could give people about how to best communicate problems or challenges in the account? Hello there, and I hope you're enjoying my latest interview. I just wanted to quickly let you know that all of these interviews are sponsored by my paid Google Ads community, which is called the Google Ads Mastery Community. I set this community up for one clear purpose, and that is so that I could provide people with direct Google Ads support. And we do this in 3 main ways. Firstly, we run weekly live calls, and these are live calls that are run in all different time zones so that we can get the support to you. And it's where you can actually ask myself and also highly skilled members of my Defined Digital Academy team direct questions about your Google Ads campaigns. We then also run monthly masterclasses, and these are in-depth teachings for what you need for success with Google Ads. And they don't only cover things inside of the Google Ads dashboard, we also cover specific training around things like offline conversions and how to increase the performance of your landing pages. All the important things you need for true success with Google Ads. And above all else, we've got our Google Ads community feed. And this is where you can join well over 300 other like-minded professionals like you. And we've got Google Ads specialists, agency owners, and also direct business owners who are there supporting and helping each other with how to see the best success with Google Ads throughout the year. And the best thing about this community is that it's all at a really low price because you can get full access for less than the price of a cup of coffee every day. And that's why I set up this community, is so that you can get tailored Google Ads support for a very low price. Right now, we're going to get right back into the interview, but if you'd like to find out more information about how you could join and plus also get a lifetime discount to join my Google Ads Mastery community, just follow the link in the description below.
Yeah, so as mentioned before, sometimes the performance becomes inconsistent, and that can be caused by a lot of things like internally, externally, market developments, changes in Google Ads algorithm, new competitors, maybe also your own supply. For example, in the case of e-commerce stores, when your best-selling products are not available anymore, see that the algorithm responds to it and that the performance might sometimes dip. Yeah, it goes without saying that you always have to be transparent about the performance. And of course, if you do it right, people will already know because they have a dashboard that they can visit on demand to see how the performance is going. But I think it's very important that you're always the first one, again, to discover a problem. Like, hey, this is what we spotted. You might have noticed already, but I wanted to mention it. This is what we see in the account. And if you zoom out a bit more, this is what we see over the entire analytics of the company. So also looking at all the channels do we see similar trends in SEO, in social, or direct traffic? So basically showing that you look at the problem from multiple angles and not just your pillar, your silo Google Ads, and telling them where you think the problem lies and also how you're going to approach this. And of course, you can never make any promises. That's what I never do. I just tell them, like, I've seen a similar problem. I've in the past I've tried solving it this way. In most occasions, it offered a solution. But of course, we cannot guarantee anything. But we'll do our best, and we know from experience that this is something that often helps. Basically, really taking them with you in your thought process.
Yeah. One thing I've also found has helped too is that I always have a saying with a client, like when we have a good week, and especially if we've made a change and it's worked well, is I let them know that I don't get excited about a good week and a good day.
Yeah.
But then I also don't get devastated about a bad week and a bad day. Because if you look out, like, if you zoom out on a performance, you can see a straight, upward trend line. But if you go in and you can see, sometimes you can have 2, 3, 4 bad weeks in a row. But then you're able to course correct. And I found at the start of my career, I would sometimes over celebrate good wins, like a good day or a good week. And then when a bad performance happens, because you've taken all the credit for a good performance, you kind of got to take all the credit for the bad performance. So I really learned that. So it's something I say to clients all the time is that, I'm more dealing in long-term trends of 4, 6, 8 weeks. So I'm not stressed about a bad day, but I'm also not too excited about a good day. So that was one thing that I found has really, really, really helped in the communication.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think it's also part of entrepreneurship, managing your emotions about performance. Don't get too stoked about a good performance, but also don't let your head down when the performance is down a little bit, because that's just part of the deal, part of the game. Yeah. And especially because there's so many external factors in the equation, right, that influence the performance. So, from a stoic perspective, you shouldn't worry too much about the stuff that you don't have full control over.
Good. I also think that's really, really important, especially when you're dealing with small and medium businesses. For larger businesses who have, they're looking at larger metrics and those type of things. They're kind of not okay, but they're generally more happier with a bad month. Whereas if you've got a small business, and this is really, I think, the role of the freelancer agencies to really get to know the owner or whoever you're talking to, or the business management team you're talking to, because if that business is under stress and financial stress, a bad month means a really, really big thing. So then you have to just be understanding of what's happening there, and really adjust your communication accordingly. And just understanding that's why sometimes business owners are ringing you every day, like, we haven't had any conversions today, or we've got low conversions. So you've just got to know, I think it's always good to have insight into the environment of the business that you're dealing with.
Yeah. And also in the case of those small category clients, because it impacts them so significantly compared to a big company that doesn't care about losing a few thousand, for example. It also opens the door for micromanaging a bit more. And that's the reason why, from a strategical perspective, some Google Ads specialists don't like working with smaller clients, with smaller accounts, because it's a completely different way of managing a client.
Yeah. And I mean, especially when you're dealing with smaller clients, and one thing I let any agency worker or freelancer, I always try to remind them is that each of those sales, so one sale could mean that they can keep another staff member on for a week, or it can be some cases where, every 10 sales is another week in business. So you just have to be really, really mindful of why sometimes owners get so emotional with things, because this is legitimately their livelihood. Some of them could have their house on the mortgage and all of those type of things that they've got to get. So it's just, I guess, understanding and taking a bit of a broader view of why there could be some stress in the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And then especially for those smaller clients, it's important to manage the expectations. Like, the algorithm needs time to learn. You need conversions to be able to optimize. Every business needs to find the right combination of settings to make it work. Landing pages optimizations may be needed. Offer alterations might be needed to be more competitive compared to the rest of the market. So it's a lot of educating as well, the smaller clients.
No, definitely. All right. So we've spoken about client retention. Now let's just change gears a little bit and just talk about, are there any signs that you've seen from the clients, from the agencies that you work with, that's kind of like a common sign or communication from clients that you need to look out for that may tell that the client is thinking about leaving or thinking about changing providers?
I think in a lot of ways, the relationship with a client is can be compared to the relationship with with your partner, for example.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning of the relationship, you're stoked, you're excited for the things to come. But if performance is going down or becomes inconsistent, then you see that clients, of course, they still care, and that's the reason why they show their concerns and what they're thinking about, and they provide feedback. But as soon as you start noticing that the commitment drops, like they're not as responsive anymore. Whenever you send a report, you barely get a response to it, or like inside questions about the report. That's the moment when you really should start worrying, because a lack of commitment, lack of care means that they're mentally somewhere else. Maybe your partner is already looking for someone else, has given up on the relationship basically, and looking for alternatives. And that is also the case along the lines of how it works in Google Ads and the clients for agencies.
So, I mean, are there any recommendations you would give people if they're noticing? So let's just say you're noticing that a client's no longer responsive. I mean, do you recommend to get on the front foot about it, or what are you trying to communicate? Are you just outrightly asking, are you happy with the services? What are your concerns here?
Of course, you can pick up on signs like the lack of responsiveness in that they don't give in-depth responses on your reports anymore. Of course, you can pick up on those signs, but you can feel it, right? Because you're with them in a relationship, and you see that the performance is going down, which is very often the most important reason for dissatisfied clients. And I think you can actually prevent this situation by being transparent like the entire time, and not just when it starts to matter. So ask them how they're feeling, especially if the performance goes down, align with them even more. And one important thing, and that's something that most agencies actually don't have. I did a poll on LinkedIn asking like, hey, how's your client success management arranged in your agency? 87% didn't have like a structured approach for client success management. It was very often just a survey they send out every once in a while. But I think that is a key that's missing in many agencies, like a proper, sophisticated client success research system in which regularly you ask for feedback. And the more independent the person who gathers that information is, the better. Because in some agencies, few agencies responded that on the poll, is that they just got the dedicated Google Ads specialist to ask questions like, how do you think things are going? Are you satisfied? Blah, blah. But because it is the same person who's running the account, it's the same person who's asking those questions, people might not feel as needed to share their opinions and their experiences. So having a dedicated client success manager on those clients and to gather that feedback, I think that's a missing part in many agencies. Yeah, it's a big part of the strategy to retain clients.
All right, let's now talk about, obviously you see different agencies and how they operate. What are some of the best pricing models that are you seeing having the most success right now?
Yeah, there are quite a few. And I still think that most agencies charge per hour. I don't know. Is it something that you said it a long time ago?
No. Like I'd say in Australia, most agencies are on a like a percentage model is generally what I see. Like a percentage, they may have a flat fee, but they would generally have a percentage model.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's just an Australian thing, but not many would go by the hour, especially when we're talking about Google Ads. Things like, web development, SEO, that would still generally be hourly. But in terms of Google Ads, all the agencies I was involved in Australia, we just went pure percentage model.
Yeah, so I think charging per hour is still, you can use it for consultant calls or one-off fixes or small projects where you have a clear scope. But yeah, of course, you don't want to do that anymore because it's so old-fashioned and it doesn't look at the performance at all. It's very arbitrary, right? So percentage of ad spend, I think that's the number 2 pricing model that agencies use. Just like the charging per hour, it doesn't take the performance into regard.
No, I agree with you there.
And I think it could work, but you definitely need to add some nuances to it, some extra rules to it. So for example, whenever the spend goes up, the spend goes up a twofold. That doesn't mean that the workload also doubles, right?
No.
So a nuance to it would be as the spend increases more and more, the percentage that you charge goes down. That's really like a bit fair. Also, for example, I know a guy who actually operated in this way, and at some point he made himself too expensive and the client decided to leave. So what I would also advise is to add a cap to your invoice, like the amount that we charge over a month's work can never be higher than this. And of course, like you want to tie some of the performance to it. So you can say that whenever a certain return on ad spend targets are met, then you can maintain the percentages of the ad spend that you charge. But if you don't meet those return on ad spend targets, then the percentage of the ad spend that you can charge also drops. So it moves a little bit with the performance. I think if you use that combination, that's a very good one. Because what you can also do, and of course this is the ideal scenario, is that you would charge based on added value. Could be either revenue or ideally profit, of course, profit from ad spend. But downside of that is that, and that's what my roomie does. He charges based on the value, on the profit, but he has a lot of discussion about it, because sometimes you see a spike in performance, for example, on Black Fridays and Cyber Mondays and Christmas, whatever. And then it's really hard to distill like what is your attributed value to that performance. And of course, you can do it with proper tracking, but the tracking has to be like crystal clear to actually prove that this is what you contributed to the increase in performance. So that leaves a lot of room for discussion. So I think for ease, percentage of ad spend with those extra rules is something that many agencies can work with. Because also if you serve smaller clients who don't have a sophisticated tracking system, it's really hard to, or it doesn't even work to charge based on the added value to performance.
One thing that I guess probably in my case, because I get this question asked a lot, the biggest recommendation that I give anyone is I always like to set out more of a bit of a set price for the first 90 days, because sometimes in that first 90 days, you do have some deliverables around. We might need to set up your conversion tracking. We might need to make some changes on a landing page. So you're actually pricing out those deliverables individually. But then what I always like to do is I always like to have basically a 90-day cycle of an agreement. So I never lock them into any type of agreement, but I'm doing a quarterly meeting. And at that quarterly meeting, we're doing a couple of things. One, we're reviewing my management, or our management, but also two, we're building into, some new projects that we want to be potentially doing. And the reason why I like that is because it's basically going, so let's just say, for example, in an e-commerce frame. So now with the e-commerce clients, we're already starting to talk about Black Friday. Also for lead generation, if you're talking that through different seasonality, what I also found is that it did two things. One, it stopped any surprises. So like you might be through a project or through a monthly management, and then you get this whole extra heap of work thrown on you, or the relationship may change and the pricing model doesn't fit it anymore. So if you kind of build it every 90 days that you and the client know that you're going to be talking about your rates again, it's always built in there. But what it also does as well is you kind of know that you've got some longevity in that client, because they're kind of like verbally committing to another 3 months. And even sometimes with if they're not 100% happy with your service, at least you then know you've bought yourself another 3 months to really, really focus on what, overcome their concerns, overcome their problems, so that you can retain that client for the long term.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing that I could add to, for example, the pricing model of percentage of ad spend is that's basically a hybrid solution, is that you always have like some sort of foundation that you charge, like a fixed fee, and then percentage of ad spend based on top of that. So it's not completely relying on ad spend, but just in a lower degree. Yeah. So for example, if you would just charge percentage of ad spend, you would start with 20 and you go all the way down as the spend goes up. But with this foundational layer, you would rely less on percentage of ad spend. And I think that's a bit more aligned for both the client and the Google Ads specialist.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is with all this, especially when you're first starting out, is just to be flexible with the client in terms of like I always put it, is trying to make something that works for both me and the client. The other thing that I'll even sometimes do as well with the 90-day things is that we may even, like if I'm offering some level of discount until we see performance metrics hitting, I do let them know that, this is just to get the relationship starting, but eventually this is what I'm going to be charging. So it kind of like maps out between you and the owner or the business. So you go, yep, you might be saying, let's just say, for example, they're paying $5,000 now, but you go, over the next 12 months, I want to get this to $7,500 or $8,000, but this is what it's going to mean for you. So it kind of like gets you both aligned to a goal. But yeah, I think the big thing is flexibility, talking it through and just building the relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Hey, last one I want to finish on. We've spoken about retaining clients. We've spoken about signs. We've spoken about pricing models. Probably the biggest thing we need to talk about is the best models you've seen for agencies and freelancers, what they're using to actually acquire new clients.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, it comes down to this. Average agencies change new clients, and the best agencies, they attract them. And I think it has to do with something that's the nature of the agency, because some agencies, the best agencies, in general, have people who work there who actually really love what they're doing. They love Google Ads. They love to read about the new trends, the new developments, new updates, market developments. And reading is just one way in which you can see that someone actually really does what he's doing, but also the fact that the people who work at big agencies tend to write more on LinkedIn, actually sharing the things they learned, and they want to get into the discussion with other Google Ads specialists to really like interact about what's happening and to basically nerd out on all the topics. So the best agencies, they attract them by sharing information, sharing value.
You know, I 100% agree with you. Like I would say as a byproduct for me, when I started this YouTube channel, I set it up with the goal of helping business owners to be able to run their own Google Ads campaigns. As a byproduct, what's happened is I've had more leads than we can actually handle, just purely by, and it's not even like there's no advertising. I think we put a link in the description. We don't advertise it, but it's purely what you're saying is the attraction. And I think sometimes people kind of forget, like if you could put the information, your strategies out into different forms, like you said, like LinkedIn, it could be any other platforms. There's a thought process that means that you become irrelevant. But what it actually does for a business owner is that they want to align themselves with someone who knows what they're talking about. And it builds up that confidence and then what I've also found, this interesting thing that I found too, is that I now don't do any manual outreach. And even when people outreach to me for me to take on their account, the whole relationship's changed. So it's rather than me like kind of like, like when I first started, you're kind of like hustling to sign a new client. Whereas now when they come in and they make the first move to contact you, you already get to start to, so those things we spoke about at the start, like communication in the first 90 days, all those things become so much easier because they know they've initiated the discussion.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole difference between inbound and outbound, right? Like, I started writing on LinkedIn when I was still working for the agency traffic builders back in Holland. As my followers grew and the audience, I got more and more DMs saying like, hey, Denie, we need some help with Google Ads. Can you help out with us? And I've never done an ask. I never said like, hey guys, I offer Google Ads freelance services on the site. Who's interested? As you build your audience and you postpone the ask, people will just drop in your DM asking like, hey, and that's something I read very often. I've read like 60 posts of you, or I've followed you for almost a year now, and we are at the point that we need a Google Ads specialist, and you're always top of mind because you're always there, right? Showing what you know about Google Ads and cases and the tips and the biggest mistakes that people make. So basically showing on a daily basis that you understand what you're doing. That's what also the best agencies are doing and the best freelancers.
Yeah. And it is very much playing more of the longer game on the sense of, the content that you're sharing today is probably not going to, you won't see the difference whether you share or not, but it's like that stacking up of if you're sharing multiple pieces of content every day, every week, eventually you build up an audience that will reach out when they need you. They may not need you now, but 3 months from now, 4 months from now, they may be wanting to reach out because they're in that space where they need a new Google Ads specialist. Hey, Denie, thank you so much for coming on. Just for everyone listening or watching, if you follow the links in the description below, I'm going to give you, I'm going to have the links so that you can contact with Denie and his team at the agency team. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Aaron. See you later.